I thought a lot about what the topic should be for this first episode of It's All Good. The point behind this series is simple. I'm going to talk about stuff that I like across all of pop culture. Films, comics, games, TV, and so on. It may not seem exactly groundbreaking or original, but if I could add one small hook that might catch your interest, I tend to like stuff that most people don't. And my hope is that I can get some of you out there to take a second look at these works of art, because I feel they deserve it. When that mission statement dawned on me, there was only one topic I could think of as an opener. 2013's Man of Steel. If there's a single emotion that comes to mind any time I think about this film, it's joy. And I'm honestly sad more people don't feel that way. The first sound we hear in the film is Kal-El's heartbeat as he's being delivered into the world by his parents. Krypton is a world divided, literally. Even as the planet is tearing itself apart, its people still battle with each other. Civil war, a military coup, the end of all things. This is the reality that Superman is born into. A birth, by the way, that is illegal in Kryptonian society. Kryptonians are bred artificially, formed in birthing chambers to be as close to perfect as possible. Jor-El and Lara choose instead a normal conception. Superman wasn't bred to be perfect. He's normal, flawed even, when compared to the rest of his species. His parents realized that to be better, he had to be different. I love this opening because not only does it set the bombastic tone for the rest of the film that follows, but it creates a version of Krypton that made me care about Superman's beginnings. Superman is my favorite character, but the earliest parts of his origin were always the least interesting to me. The Doom Planet part of things never stuck as much as his years in Smallville with Ma and Pa Kent did. But, in Man of Steel, we're given a people at war, a vast alien landscape, and we're shown a version of Jor-El and Lara who aren't just scientists, but complete badasses who will do anything to ensure their son and the remnants of their species survive past them and their world. Listen to the words I'm about to say. Superman's father rides a dragon, jumps into a submerged birthing chamber, and steals a computer skull, #Brainiac, which he then uses to imprint all of Krypton's genetic history into his son's very DNA, thus making him both the savior of, and living monument to, a dead world. That's art. Cool, epic, and beautiful art. And from there, everything plummets towards the inevitable conclusion we all know is coming. Kel's ship is launched, Jor-El dies, Zod and his forces are imprisoned, and Lara watches her world burn. Our final bit of prologue is watching the small Kryptonian ship enter our galaxy on its path towards Earth before finally crashing in the heart of Kansas. Man of Steel presents a version of Superman that's young, reckless, inexperienced, and all of those faults end up costing him and those around him. This isn't a Superman who's trained on the farm and owned his abilities. Here, Pa Kent fought to keep his son's gifts hidden out of the very real fear that someone might come and take Clark away. When he saves a school bus full of kids from drowning, one of the kids' parents calls it an act of God, which the Kents have to struggle to defuse. Where we've seen more simplified versions of Clark's upbringing over the years, Man of Steel puts forth perhaps a more grounded, human approach. Everyone affected by Clark's actions are in awe at best and terrified at worst. Ma and Pa Kent just want to keep their adopted child safe at all costs, even if it means their own lives. And speaking of Jonathan's controversial sacrifice, this is the moment that gives Clark purpose. A moment, by the way, that's missing from most versions of Superman's origin. You can disagree with how it's handled, or the reasoning behind it, but it's this moment, Clark respecting his father, even at the cost of the man's life, that makes him go off in search of understanding. If Clark's so special, so unique, that his own father would be willing to die in the name of protecting his anonymity, there must be a larger purpose for his existence. He works in secret among the common man because he's not only looking to understand himself and his place in the world, but he also wants to protect others the way he couldn't protect his own father. And even though he's done some good, he still hasn't been tested. Clark hasn't faced a true challenge that's made him realize his own strengths and limitations, and what it means to be a hero. Enter Zod. Whenever I talk about this film, I always point out that it's not only a superhero film, but it's an alien invasion movie as well. The moment this becomes evident is when Zod and his forces make their presence known on Earth. Screens around the world go dark, and Zod's face, obscured by his Giger-esque helmet, greets humanity. It's at this point that the story takes a heavy shift in tone, and I've also noticed this is when people start actively disliking Man of Steel. A complaint often leveled at the film is its ridiculous level of destruction and collateral damage. I never took issue with this aspect of the film. If anything, I reveled in it. I don't think we've seen superpowered fighting on this scale in films ever. The Battle of New York, the Smith fight at the end of Matrix Revolutions, the climax of Winter Soldier, Bane cutting off Gotham from the rest of the country. There's a certain level of destruction to all of these moments in superhero cinema, but none of them come close to the conflict in Smallville, or the near destruction of Metropolis. Man of Steel presents beings with godlike powers in conflict like never before, and mankind is close to powerless to do anything about it. What humors me to no end about this common complaint is that it's so representative of my generation's mentality. It's not enough that Superman is literally a single individual fighting off an alien invasion. It's that he's not doing it well enough. It's that he's contributing to the destruction. This all despite the fact that Clark has never been tested to these lengths against beings on an equal power level to him. What have you done for me lately, indeed? So, you'll forgive me if I don't give those complaints much regard. The idea that Superman can simply move a fight elsewhere because he wants to is ridiculous. You try telling the bully who's tearing down your treehouse to stop and fight you in an empty parking lot instead, and tell me how that works out for you. Now, this isn't to say that Superman is free from all culpability. At times, his actions do lead to others being harmed. While we're never shown this explicitly, it's something we can infer. To that, I'd say, look at the foundations that have been laid down throughout the film. Every time Clark is faced with a bully, a problem, an impasse, he's told to restrain himself. Don't act out. Keep calm. Remain anonymous. Don't single yourself out, and don't reveal the truth of who you are, lest bad things happen to you and the ones you love. Zod's arrival, and the promise of harm to come to Martha and the people of Earth, is Superman's breaking point. That lifetime of restraint? This is the moment those shackles are removed. Superman knows that Zod and his men can take as much as he can dish out. On some personal level, deep to the core of Clark's id, it must have been a freeing, liberating sensation. And so, finally, we see the potential he's been holding back unleashed. It's primal, it's destructive, and it's something I knew Superman would have to answer for. Which he did in Man of Steel's follow-up Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. But that's another topic for another episode. What should be taken from the bulk of the conflict is the fact that Superman never backs down and never gives up. Regardless of the fact that he's outclassed and outmatched in every sense, he perseveres. This fortitude is reflected in the actions of the supporting characters as well. Lois always seeks out the truth, no matter how often her life is placed in jeopardy. In death, Jor-El is still there for his son. Martha stands up to Zod on the front steps of her own home. Both Colonel Hardy and Dr. Hamilton hold their own against Faora and sacrifice themselves for the good of humanity. Even Perry White and Steve stay with Jenny Olsen instead of running for their lives in the face of certain death. This film is filled with acts of bravery in the face of insurmountable odds, and I love it for that. I want to wrap this episode up, but I can't without addressing the one thing that people hold against Man of Steel more than anything else: the death of Zod at the hands of Superman. When this moment hit, I suspect most audience members were waiting for a more traditional, safe Hollywood resolution. Perry and his friends run in and zap Zod with some sort of Kryptonian device from the wreckage of his ship. Or maybe Lois gets the civilians out of the way just in time, followed by Superman knocking Zod unconscious. But this isn't that movie. None of the characters up to this point were given easy solutions to complex problems, and I knew the same would hold true for Superman in this moment. At this point in the film, Zod is a soldier without a war, a man without a nation, and a weapon without a target. He was genetically designed to fight, to conquer, and to kill. All that refined savagery becomes skewed once he's lost the ability to rebuild Krypton, and Zod makes it clear to Superman, in no uncertain terms, that he's going to kill every last human being on the planet Earth. There's no weapon that can stop him, no cell that can contain him, and there's no way to access the Phantom Zone. Superman is the only one who can stop Zod from destroying this planet he now calls home, and he makes the most painful, difficult decision of his life. The film doesn't glorify Zod's death. Clark is broken and traumatized by the act of killing the only other member of his race left alive, and as will become a recurring theme, we end on him in the arms of the only person on Earth strong enough to hold him, Lois. I love Man of Steel. 4 years after its release, it's still a film I think about on a semi-regular basis. It's a story of fathers, of parents. It's the story of finding your place in the world. It's the story of hope, steel, and destruction, and all the beauty those words define. I hope I've given you some food for thought, and maybe even changed your mind on what is one of my favorite films. If I still haven't managed to do any of that, don't worry. It's all good. See you next time.